Welcome back. This past week, the House of Representatives and the U.S. Senate passed a landmark piece of legislation spending $370 billion to fight climate change. What will the impact be in California? For the environmental community in this state, it was a huge win. Arnold Sowell Jr. is Executive Director of Next Gen Policy based in Sacramento. David Weiskopf is a Senior Policy Advisor for Climate and Environmental Issues for that organization, one of the leading environmental groups in the state. So, Mr. Sowell, let's talk with you. How is this going to help?
The overarching goal, Conan, is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions significantly, dramatically, and immediately. And that's what the bill in Washington, D.C. is going to strive to do, as well as the work that we're doing here in California, with a $54 billion sort of investment from our budget resources into things like electric vehicle procurement and deployment, into the reduction of sort of fossil fuel dependency, into other sort of technological sort of innovations and advances that will help us immediately reduce greenhouse gas emissions.
Mr. Weiskopf, there's a $7,500 tax credit for those who buy a non-polluting, or I should say an electric vehicle. But there are all sorts of limits to that. It's based on your income, based on the kind of car you want to buy, and the fact that the car has to be made in the U.S., the battery has to be produced here. The Alliance for Automotive Innovation says that 70% of the electric vehicles currently available will be ineligible for the tax credit.
You know, I think part of what we're seeing in this new wave of climate legislation in Washington and in California is a recognition that this is not, just a spreadsheet exercise. This is a kitchen table issue. We're talking about saving up to 4,000 lives per year in 2030 from the federal law, plus more from the California investments and new rules. But it's also an economic issue. Here in California, we have the potential to become one of the biggest suppliers globally of the minerals and components for the batteries that will power these vehicles, power homes, that will back up grid resources for reliable electricity. And that's going to mean up to 1.5 million jobs in 2030, just from the federal bill, even more when you focus on the contributions of California's world-leading efforts to build offshore wind, to build solar power throughout the state. And these jobs are really going to spread nationwide. So the focus in the federal bill on the Made in America provisions is really a way to help kickstart those industries, take them to the next level in places like California where they're already running, and to really spread those benefits nationwide.
So the bill also has some elements to the oil and gas industry. It opens up some areas for potential leases. Whenever you open up an area for wind or solar, you also have to open it up for possible drilling. Is that a compromise I guess you had to live with?
Conan, this is always one of those difficulties when you get into trying to negotiate and get far-reaching and forward-thinking sort of advancements in climate policy across the finish line. And I can't say whether it was necessarily wise or not, but it was necessary in order to advance the bill.
And finally, Mr. Weiskopf, the Diablo Canyon nuclear power plant, the last nuclear plant in California in San Luis Obispo County, is set to close. It is non-polluting when it comes to CO2. It is also 9% of the power grid. Is your organization supporting keeping that power plant open longer? That's part of this bill, too.
So, the negotiations around what, if any, extension of the life of the Diablo Canyon plant are ongoing right now in the legislature, with the governor, with stakeholders and energy experts. Getting this right, if we're going to do it, is critical. So there's a lot of safety issues at stake. There's a lot of affordability issues at stake, and so it's something that is really going to depend a lot on the details of doing it the right way.
So if every car was electric in this state, we stopped polluting, putting up CO2 in the atmosphere from now to the end of the century, nothing would change when it comes to global climate temperature, because so much methane, so much coal is being burned in massive markets like China and India. So this isn't going to move the needle, other than the fact that it will help do our part and the idea is to lead the way for the rest of the world. Listen, we're doing our part. You have to do yours.
Absolutely. I couldn't have said it better, Conan.
Arnold Sowell Jr. is the Executive Director of Next Gen Policy based in Sacramento. David Weiskopf, Senior Policy Advisor also for that organization. Thank you to both of you for coming.